something inside of me, and I call it women's intuition, tells me, no, you're full of shit. One of my favorite lines is, don't piss on me and try to tell me it's raining. And that, my friend, to me is like emotional intelligence.
Welcome to Fear with Christine Spratley. Living like a head in charge, the podcast where Christine says fear, questions everything, and takes bold action. Christine Spratley is a former professional boxer, nanny, and 29-plus-year corporate warrior turned founder of HBIC Advisors, where she is a public speaker and coach. She's been saying fear her whole life, many times without even realizing it. So tune in, spread the word, and get ready, because this isn't about aging with grace. It's about aging with mischief, audacity, and having a damn good story to tell.
Tubs, ladies and gentlemen, whoever is listening this morning, this afternoon, or this evening, you are listening to the podcast Fuck Fear with Christine Spratley, living like an HBIC, that is head bitch in charge. And today we're going to do something kind of fun. I'm going to talk about emotions. Ooh. And really kind of them and woman, again, myth busting around them, and also about emotional intelligence. If anybody has heard anything lately, and I would say probably since the mid-90s it really came out, there was an article in 1990 by John D. Mayer, University of New Hampshire. Basically, it was really the first big article about emotional intelligence. So we're going to talk about that. It's called EQ, or EI, some people call it as well. But it came out and literally shifted the perspective in business and the focus on what should be really big and what we should be promoting in business. And it's all around emotions, ladies. Imagine that. Imagine one of our greatest qualities being big in business and being an attribute to business. So first of all, we're going to talk about emotions are now marketable. All right. And I think that's really a good. For centuries, I think we've all heard this myth that women are, well, we're just emotional creatures. We're just too emotional. You know, if you just calm down and be more logic. But now, with emotional intelligence, in corporate, it's a corporate must-have. I mean, I know that in the corporations that I worked, it was a must-have. It is a differentiator, a leadership differentiator even. And what is funny is that it's actually a really big business advantage. And I don't think women understand the power we have in that. And I know I didn't until I really started realizing the advantage that it gave me in a room. And then I also don't know that men understand the power that we have as women to understand the emotional context that completely goes over their head. In so many meetings, we are picking up on little or big things, left and right, unspoken comments, moves, positionings, and that's all in data. I think of it as data, ladies. And then we come back and we go and what the hell was going on? The discussion that wasn't said, it's always what's unsaid in the room that really matters. We are realizing that we have those skills and powers, and we've had them since freaking about puberty, ladies. I mean, if we really think it, and I'll walk you through kind of how I think about that. But it's finally starting to dawn on men. And again, this is a really weird time to have this conversation given the latest inauguration and kind of the attitude and the prevailing attitude. But I do think that men are discovering emotional intelligence. If you are a smart businessman, if you are listening to this podcast and you are a smart businessman, you damn sure are listening to emotional intelligence. You are discovering it because you are finally figuring out that it is not good to be emotionless fuckstick. And I'm serious. I mean, I'm not trying to badmouth men or anything, but the days of not having emotions tell you conditions around a situation are just really pathetic. I mean, we're past that, guys. And I'm really glad that people are now starting to get it and men are starting to get it. So that's what we're going to go into today.
Do you have any idea why it seems to just now be a thing instead of having been around for a long time?
I don't know, because, and that's a good question. So I will have to, because we're going to do a couple series on this. I will actually look that up, because I did read about kind of emotional intelligence and when it came and the, because it was around in the 1960s and 1980s, the preliminary concepts, and in 1985, Wayne Payne's dissertation on emotional intelligence. But typically, what I've found is there's usually larger societal movements that are happening. And we also know that when we want to introduce something into a business setting, we tend to make it not applicable, but appealing and palatable. And so you can't walk into a business setting and say, hey, guys, I think you should be a little bit more emotionally aware. I don't think any corporate person's going to do that. But emotional intelligence sounds good. Emotional intelligence sounds like a leadership skill.
Yeah.
So I don't know what triggered it, but I do know that the dressing up and the lipstick and the makeup that they put on it to make it appealing and appetizing to the male-dominated corporate world happened. And it'll be interesting. I'll do some research on that one, though. But I like that question. If anybody knows, I'll love to hear your thoughts on that. So, again, the history of emotional intelligence, and I'm going to put this kind of in the sense of the history as to when men caught on to it. And it started back, what I could find, like 1985. Again, Wayne Leon Payne is his name, did an academic dissertation on it. And he called it the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings, emotions, to discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and action. And I really think that is such an incredible way to really describe, for me, how I deal with emotions and how I process how emotions impact my decision making. And again, when I first started this conversation today, it was about what we have is emotions, and women are too emotional. Well, no, we're logical. I think we are logical creatures. I know I am a logical creature, but I use emotions to give me the context to help me make a logical decision. It doesn't necessarily swing it one way or the other, but I think his definition and articulation of that is that it is used for information to guide one's thinking and actions. It doesn't say it takes the lead, it says it guides it, gives it information. And I always like to say that, for me, emotions aren't facts. They're indicators. They're indicators of how I think I have experienced a event, how I think I'm experiencing an event, or how I think I might experience a future event. So again, they guide me sometimes. And then in 1995, I think Daniel Goleman wrote the book Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. And I think this was the really big time where it started to kind of go, whoa, because everybody just said, well, this is logic, and we're going to do logic, and this is your IQ, and why this matters. And there was also a shift kind of in that time frame about in hiring practices and how we look at and evaluate people that we're hiring. And, while this is all happening, we have been, as women, we have been managing our emotions since the dawn of time. I'm serious. We all went through it in puberty. We all went through it every month since. And when we end up going through perimenopause and menopause, we're still managing that shit. Unfortunately, typically on a daily basis instead of just twice, once a month for a week or so. But we do it through, mediating fights. We do it through de-escalating toddler meltdowns. We manage all that. We manage. How many times have we come in and negotiated out a fight? I mean, and men, if you're listening, think about the women in your life and how many times they have come into and calmed everybody down, walked somebody off a ledge, and they did it by walking into the situation. And one of the things that I was always told that I was the kind of the fireman of the bunch. I could come in and figure out the situation, smooth it out. And that's part of the emotional intelligence. And I really think that we as women, think about this, women, think about what we've gone through and what we've experienced, and how that lines up. Our hormonal cycles, okay? We have a heightened body awareness that encourage self-monitoring of emotions, okay? That's the, EQ competency. We have been raised to be nurturers and caretakers and to be attuned to other people's feelings and emotions and their needs. Empathy and relationship management is the EQ competency of that. Our adolescence, our peer relationships, our dating, pressures around that, resiliency, self-motivation. I mean, all of that is part of that EQ competency. And I think women, we need to remember that this is what we've been through our whole lives. We are always doing this in 90% of our situations. I'll give you a real simple example. When we get ready to go out, and gentlemen, I hear this all the time. Oh, you spend too much time in the bathroom, blah, 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 blah. Put too much shit on your face, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, first of all, just back up a step. If none of you, I don't care who the hell you are, or how good you are of a husband, boyfriend, whatever, none of you want us walking out looking like shit. You ain't putting us in front of your buds. You ain't putting us on your arm. You aren't parading us around town with us looking like we do in the morning when we roll over and have dragon breath. I'm just calling you out on that. You don't. You want us, no, it's okay for you to free ball, but you do not want us, boobs hanging out, hair messed up. I mean, seriously, you don't. So when we get ready to go out, we get in there and we want to look good. I mean, sometimes we dress for other women, sometimes we dress for ourselves, and sometimes we dress for our man. But typically, we go out and we put on this outfit and we're thinking about it. And then we go out and we assess when we walk into every room. I know I do. And sometimes I walk in with a full bucket of esteem and my assessment is on target, neutral, but I am looking. I am monitoring the room. I am seeing the room. I'm seeing how it interacts with me, how it interacts with whoever's with me. We are doing that. That's a date night, and we're doing it. And I think I talk to women all the time about this. We constantly are swatting a room, strategic analysis of a room, strengths, weaknesses, advantages, and threats, or opportunities and threats. And we do that constantly. That is part of emotional intelligence. We want to see who's the strong one in the room, who are the weak ones, what are our opportunities, and who the threats are in the room. And those threats it could be at the shopping line. It could be figuring out which line to go in and who's the best cash. I mean, we are assessing all that, or it could be the boardroom, So women, just take a minute and think about all the things that you go through and have at each stage of your life: adolescence, college, career, marriage, kids, and think about all the stuff that you emotionally assess, okay? So we have tons of negotiating skills. We've talked about this before, Joe. We go into crisis management mode. Diffusing fights between mom and your sister at Thanksgiving before, the mashed potatoes become a projectile weapon. Strategic silence. We've been practicing that. Men just thought we were giving them the silent treatment. That's strategic silence. Women, in business, when we use it in negotiations, it's called the pregnant pause. We're good with that stuff. We are good with that stuff. Reading the room.
Christine Spratley doesn't hide her life. She's real about it, warts and all. After leaving 29 plus years in corporate, she founded HBIC Advisors with one mission: be a fierce ally for women to stop waiting for permission to live boldly. If you want your audience to unapologetically run until apprehended toward fulfillment, Christine is your next podcast guest. Warning: may cause spontaneous HBIC badassery. Book her now at christinespratley.com.
I'll tell you this one story about, and I never thought that my skill set, I never really pronounced it and was like, this is my superpower. But I do a talk, and I did it for a group of women, and it was knowing your business superpower. And about 3 years ago now, I was with a client, and we were on a call. And I worked at an accounting firm, although I worked in economic development and negotiation. So I had negotiated their incentives. They were going to build something, hire some people. So I negotiated with the community to get them some funding and some tax credits. So on a side note, my background is in the dirt. I used to run permits, work for land development companies. I love the dirt. And so I knew building permits up and down. And so the client asked me, said, hey, listen, I know you're off and we're done with this project, but we're starting to go to the building permits, and man, we'd just really love for you to sit in on this meeting and, help out, because we know you have that background. And they trusted me, which is another part of emotional intelligence, is we tend to get the trust of people because we can read and shepherd and guide, very much like what we do as mothers and girlfriends and wives, and friends. We shepherd and guide and care. And so I said, well, okay. So on this call, we're like 5 men, all great. But it was like the engineer, it was the construction guy, the architect, and some other people doing the manufacturing lines and stuff. And you could tell, I got on and I was introduced, and you could just see it in their faces. They're like, oh, what's this broad doing here? Let alone she's from a Big Four accounting firm. What the hell what's she going to mess up in my world today? And for whatever reason, I literally said to them, I said, hey guys, listen, I know what you're thinking. Don't worry, I'm not going to get in your stuff. I'm not going to jam up your stuff. I don't want any part of what you're working in. Okay, you are the professionals. But I said, my superpower here is I'm going to help you set up this meeting. And then I'm going to go to that meeting, and y'all are going to do your thing. I'm going to do introductions. I'm going to meet and greet. And then y'all are going to do your thing. And then when we walk out, we're going to sit there and we're going to have a conversation about how you think the meeting went. And then I'm going to tell you how the meeting went. And I don't know that I was ever that ballsy to a client before, but 2 things happened. One, they were really relaxed because I had claimed what was my spot. And it was designated really easily. This is my area. My expertise is to tell you that the guy who told you could do everything is full of shit. The one that was really quiet in the corner is probably going to do everything. And the guy in the middle that really wouldn't answer any questions but sounded real slick, he's going to try and sabotage and torpedo you. And then the lady at the end, you better pay attention to her because she's the gatekeeper. And sure enough, sure as shit, she was. And it was funny because they all did their thing, but every once in a while she would text me or email me and say, hey, tell this guy blah, 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 blah. And I'd bring him up or I'd text him and say, hey, listen, why don't you just think about doing this? And he'd go do it and it'd get done. But it's funny because that was my superpower, is being able to go in and see and read. But I get that because of all the experiences and all those situations that I'd been in, those where I've had to read, where I've had to understand. I know you're telling me this, but something inside of me, and I call it women's intuition, tells me No, you're full of shit. One of my favorite lines is, don't piss on me and try to tell me it's raining. And that, my friend, to me is like emotional intelligence. It's like being able to understand what's going on out there, really, and seeing through it. So
I remember when I was like just elementary school age, right? I was 12-ish, and I looked like I was 8, and the girls were 12 and looked like they were 18. Some of them looked like they were 30. And not only in the way we looked, but, you know, in the way people acted. I acted like I was 8, even though I was 12. And the girls were acting like, you know, they had their stuff together. I think we all have similar stories to that. And so it's pretty obvious that women mature much faster emotionally. Do men ever catch up?
Oh my God, I love that question. I don't know. And I would love I don't think y'all do. I think that's why sometimes women date older men. But
in
I think
hopes
there are
in hopes that they're
in hopes that they're at least they're equal on that a little bit, or at least can understand the vocabulary on the emotional level. I don't think that's why older men date younger women, but they work with what they have. But I was coaching a young woman who left Deloitte, and she had been laid off, and we were talking, and she called me up, and she was probably, this is how good she was, Joe. When she was getting ready to be laid off, and I mean, her team called me. Her partner, the partner that she worked under, called me and said, listen, is there anything, you know, can you help us find her a spot? Could she be on your team? Could she work in your division? I know she doesn't know anything about tax, but she's good at this and good at that. And one of the things that he told me was, he said, my clients call her, not me. This person, Darby, you know who you are, was not a senior manager, and she was not a partner, and yet the clients were calling her, and she had so much emotional intelligence. But back to your question, is we had this conversation because she was really beating herself up, and she just felt like she didn't have anything. And I said, Darby, wait a minute, think about this. If men, Joe, if you don't catch up, and if women, if we, which is leading into this next segment, if we manage the shit that happens to us, if we clean up our side of the street, our emotional side of the street, we learn about ourselves, we grow with that, we don't buy into beliefs that limit us and all of that stuff, because that's our own struggle. We deal with the trauma in our lives, and we call bullshit. When do you catch up? When do you catch up? I don't know. I don't know how it's physically possible for you to catch up if you're out of the gate and we keep running. I mean, we've either got to slow down or you guys got to speed up. And I don't know that there's anything to speed you up that is a motivator for a man to speed up. Not in business, there's really not. And I think sometimes the way you speed up is through your own screw-ups and traumas. And then you have an opportunity to really, you know, go to counseling or whatever you call it to take leaps and bounds. But I don't think you do. And women, think about that. Next time you're intimidated walking into a room, think about that. You've been out of the gate with emotional intelligence a hell of a lot longer than anybody else in that room, likely. The other thing that I will tell you, women, and we're going to talk about this in the next segment because I want to continue this conversation, but I want you to think about the other women in your lives, okay? And I always do this. I think that the other women in our lives, I toss to them and they toss to me. And we talked about toss. Toss is where I just say, hey, this is what I see. And they toss to me, hey, Christine, this is what I see. And I think part of that is literally going to them and going, this is where I see your emotional intelligence. And women coming back, you should have friends and a tribe around you that tosses back to you, hey, this is where I see your emotional intelligence. And the reason why we need to know this is it increases ROI. Okay? It increases margin, and companies will pay you for it if you can articulate it. So that's why it's not just a nice to have, it's a need to have, and we already got this shit. Maybe we need to pretty it up. Maybe we need to articulate it, but we've got it. And if you haven't dealt with your shit, haven't dealt with your trauma, because there's a lot of it that goes around, and I'm still unpacking some of mine. Every time I leave a thing of baggage at the carousel at the airport, I sometimes run into something else and I pick it up, But clean up your side of the street and then go get paid for it. Go get paid for it. And yes, at work, get paid for it, but in your relationship, get paid for it. Reap the benefits of what we've been through. Start making your past and the things that we've overcome and the accomplishments and the design that's within us. Start owning that. Men may have packaged emotional intelligence. Because when I was doing my research on this, I couldn't find a lot of women at the forefront of the conversations, like where their things were published. That doesn't mean there aren't any. I want to be clear. I just couldn't find them. So if you have them, bring them to me. Want to give those women those props, okay? But men may have packaged emotional intelligence, but women, we have been running the fucking factory since day one, right? We're running it. So think about that. You're not too emotional. You're just right. So, as always, a little bit of homework, okay? I want you to pick out these 4 things. When you're youth, okay? When did you start observing other people's emotions? Okay? What were you really good at picking up on? 2, in your mid-years, before college, high school years, what was that like? What were you picking up on? Okay? How were you reading the room? How were you curtailing? And some of this might not be in a good way, but just how were you? What was your strength in that? 3, college, early career, all new situations. We were all doing all sorts of stuff. And we were learning. We were monitoring the room. And then 4, mid to late careers. Your marriage, your kids, and grandkids. Think about what you were doing emotionally intelligent-wise in each of those. Write it down, and then use ChatGPT and ask, in these situations, just copy and paste in there, in these situations, tell me the business advantage that I bring. Okay? Because you don't think what you have, even if you aren't in the working professional world where you get up and you go to work and you get paid for that, write those things down anyway. And then put it in chat or your favorite AI tool and ask it, align it with the business principle that is an advantage in business and see what comes up. I think you'll be really surprised. All right, ladies, Tubbs, until next time, thank you and enjoy your day.
Thanks for tuning in to Fear with Christine Spratley, living like a head in charge. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, tell her what topics you want to hear, and share this episode with someone who could use a pantry full of boldness in their life. Remember, life isn't about aging with grace. It's about aging with mischief, audacity, and having a damn good story to tell. So show up, take action, and keep saying fear.